Welcome to this podcast. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about Jupiter's placement in Scorpio. Now, if you've been following my podcasts, one thing that you may have noticed is that I don't do podcasts on Jupiter. It's just completely absent from the entire framework of my podcasting because people don't usually worry about the planet Jupiter. They always consider it benign. So when you're where you have your Jupiter placement or where you have transits to Jupiter, you're not overly concerned. In this podcast, maybe I'm going to shed some light on all of that, because what Jupiter does in a natal chart is to act as a compensator. So that the way your natal chart is structured, there is usually pressure on the psyche deliberately, because pressure is how we externalize reality. If there were no pressure, there would be no motivation to be anything, to go anywhere, or to achieve anything. But if the pressure is too strong, it will break the mind and break the individual, and then nothing will be achieved. So either extreme is bad. Jupiter is what makes the natal chart balance in the middle, sort of, so that it doesn't veer toward extreme hardship or extreme lack of motivation. You see? And I know that a lot of people have very, very difficult lives, but that's something else. Okay? In the natal chart, the idea of difficulty is to create an external reality. And that's the work of Saturn. It limits and restricts with the sole aim of forcing something to emerge. Okay? But Saturn is not what we're going to talk about on this podcast. We're going to talk about Jupiter. Now, Sagittarius rules Jupiter, so that's a good entry point for me. The symbolism of what Sagittarius is. Now, some people say that Jupiter also rules Pisces. I do have my reservations in that respect, because the Jupiterian quality itself has some fire to it. And Pisces is anything but fire. And the essence of fire is to spark something into existence. Now, the type of limitless void that Pisces really is not where you want to spark anything. Anyway, but that's not the topic. That's not the essence of this conversation. The symbol for Sagittarius is a centaur. And a centaur is a mythical creature. It's a half man, half beast. Or you can say half horse. Okay? Now, the centaur is holding a bow and an arrow, because the centaur is gazing he's probably hunting, alright? And he's looking into the distance, way into the distance, and trying to hit a target, because his arrow is drawn. So he's hunting and he's ready to zero in on a target. Okay? Now that is the symbolism for Sagittarius. Now the hindquarters, or the lower part of this human, is a horse or some type of beast, but the idea is that the horse is very fast moving, or the beast is very fast moving, and that since it's a non-human quality, then it means that it is not open to sentience, cognition, the type that allows us to be self-aware. So it is very instinctual. Okay? Now the top of the centaur obviously is that of a man or woman, and that's cognition, right? The person is aware, so that the act of actually doing the hunt, the act of zeroing in on the target, is part of self-awareness. But the movement in the space to cover all the distance that the hunter must cover in order to be able to snatch his prey, that's instinctual. And I want you to keep this in mind as we discuss exactly what the Jupiterian personality, or the Jupiterian functional light, really is all about. Now, to understand what Sagittarius really is, because I want to do this expose on Sagittarius before going into Jupiter proper, because there is a very strong similarity between the two features, is to explain to you exactly why the centaur has its lower part as a very instinctual creature. It is because the instinct to explore the space that the centaur is basically running around in, the instinct to explore that space is very sexual. And this sexual undertone is something that is also found in the Jupiterian quality. Okay? But it's not the pure sexuality. It only has sexuality as its launch pad. But it's not the pure sexuality itself. And that sexuality, that launch pad, that origin is coming from Scorpio. So that the essence of Sagittarius is that it is the post-personality archetype of Scorpio. Okay. That's as much as I'm going to say about it. I have so many podcasts that talk about Scorpio. Okay. So I'm not really going to go, into details per se, but Jupiter's placement in Scorpio is a very strategic placement. When you see it I know Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. So a lot of people are going to have Jupiter in Scorpio. But when you see Jupiter in Scorpio in a sign, its meaning is very precise. Okay? Because it's talking about what emerges from Scorpio and how that emergence actually occurs. So the essence of Scorpio obviously is the finding of a mate. Now, most people don't know this. They think Scorpio is, merging and all that. Yes, but why? Okay? It's because the Scorpio can intuit. They can feel that they are a part of a pair. And when I mean a part of a pair, it doesn't mean a man and a woman. I'm talking about you as an individual. If you're a man, there is a woman that looks exactly like you because she is you. It's just that she's not available. She's not around you right now in the physical. Okay? So I want you to imagine yourself. You exist as a kind of pair, and that pair is always bonded sexually. So you're not really apart from each other. You're never apart. The only place where you are apart is here on Earth. And when you are born with significant placements in Scorpio, you are aware of that being separate. Okay? Being separated. You are aware of it. You just don't have any proof, and you can't zero in on it precisely what it is that is giving you this type of information. So the Scorpio archetype is felt as a desire to go back to the reality, the true reality, to seek it, to open it, to expose it. That's the reason why most Scorpios are very investigative. Their mind is always investigating different types of possibilities. They're always digging for something. The bulk, you could say almost 60 to 70% of all my clients are Scorpios. They have significant Scorpio placements because it is within them that these questions arise. Why am I here? What am I doing here? What is my life? That's Scorpio because they're searching for something. The thing that propels that search is what I'm describing to you, that it is the awareness that you are part of a couple. Now, that couple is never experienced as individuals. It's male-female experienced as one all the time, except when you come down to Earth. And then when you come down to Earth, you experience yourself as a singular entity, which is completely alien and strange to you. So when you have placements in Scorpio, your life purpose involves being aware of this reality. Even though most people, everyone is like that, but because they don't have those placements in Scorpio, nothing is ever triggered in them. They don't carry the vexation of that awareness. Now in Scorpio, that awareness, the residual of it, is in your head and it vexes you, and it is responsible for all of Scorpio's behavioral archetype. This need to protect the self and then to create these elaborate protection schemes to try to control your environment. It's the reason why Scorpio is afraid of death, because the fear is that they're going to die before they find this person. And they don't know that is what the fear is. They just think it's, just the fear of death. No, the Scorpio is afraid that it can be extinguished before it actually achieves its mission. And what is its mission? Its mission is to find the other half of it, because it does not know how to reconcile this feeling of being separated. That's the torture that is associated with the sign of Scorpio. And that makes Scorpio an extremely difficult sign, because the one thing that it needs is the one thing it cannot get. Okay? Now, when Scorpio experiences, because Scorpio, this search for meaning and all that, this search for depth, right? It's really the search for the other. When they find someone who based on the contact and the experience, they feel approximates this other half of them, then they become very frightened about the existence of this person. Why? What if this person leaves them? What if this person disappears? So you can see that the Scorpio archetype really is a conundrum. They are drawn towards finding this, and when they find it, it's nothing but fear. Okay? And in my podcast on Scorpio Rising, I talked about how the Scorpio personality needs to seek power. And I went into detail about what power really is. Okay? It's not the basic expression of, I need to seek power, so I need to do whatever it takes to get power. That's not how it works. Okay? There's a very precise way that I mean when I say that the Scorpio personality should seek power as a way of basically developing or transforming or a way of metamorphosizing that fear. It's very important because by doing so, the Scorpion is able to grow, okay, in relative safety. Now, when the Scorpion is able to achieve this connection that they want with another human being, and they have been able to transform this fear of theirs to the point where they can now begin to enjoy the true nature of this relationship, because remember, the Scorpio is aware that they are missing an important aspect of who they are. Now, most other signs are not aware of this. Scorpio is. And when they find someone that approximates that other part of them, and they can integrate that into themselves while simultaneously reducing or nullifying that fear of separation, then the individual begins to experience a quality of sexual relationship that becomes Sagittarius. That's why the Sagittarian archetype is symbolized by a centaur. Because by this experience, what it is designed to do, this connection that Scorpio has, what it is designed to do is to take the individual's mind and psyche into realms that are extremely lofty. And from those realms, the Scorpio is able to bring down a very precise type of knowing and understanding. The type that tells you what to do, how to do it. That how to do, what to do, that is Sagittarius. It's a clarity of mind enabling you to think very tangibly about a particular problem. And the quality about Sagittarius, you don't experience it at once. It requires repeated, consistent contact. That is why when people who have significant placements in Scorpio, and you are lucky enough to find someone that you can connect with on that level that takes you into this realm where you can bring this down, then it is important that you continue to have a good relationship so that you can always be, because repeated contact brings down the knowledge that you call Sagittarius. It is that knowledge that allows the formation of Capricorn. You wonder why Capricorn is a goat? It's not really a goat, it's a mountain goat. The front quarters is a mountain goat. The hind quarters is that of a fish. And in my class, I explained why that symbolism is going to change. Okay, in my classes, I teach classes on natal chart synthesis. That's where all of this is coming from. But in the classes, we go into extremely detailed mode. All right. I can't cover that here because then that makes these podcasts extremely long. So that's basically what it is. So that's how Scorpio becomes Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter is the actual targeting. Jupiter is what leaves the arrow. Jupiter is what goes on to seek the target, to confirm the target. So where you have Jupiter in your natal chart is where you have this post-orgasmic experience. It's where you are drawing it from and you are sending it back to where you have Sagittarius in your natal chart. Okay? So when Jupiter is in Scorpio, you can see that it's the impression of something that rises from Scorpio and then comes back into Scorpio. Because Jupiter in Scorpio is exactly that thing that needs to go from Scorpio to become Sagittarius. So that it means that the individual's Jupiter comes from the ability to visit these Sagittarian lofty heights. And from there they draw down inspiration, a type of fire of some kind that allows the mind to connect with the type of knowledge it needs to solve practical, tangible problems in their reality. And the way that this happens is that the moment this knowledge comes down into the individual, reality begins to conform to accommodate this knowledge. And people experience this as what? Luck, optimism, faith. But it is a luck, it is a faith that is tied right back into the depths of that sexuality. That's really what it is. This is the essence of Jupiter in Scorpio. Because the whole idea with knowing is that once you know, it changes you. If it doesn't change you, then you haven't known. It changes you at a very fundamental level once you have understood. Because the process of actual understanding is the process of transformation of the internal. And one of the maxims of astrology is that as above, so below. So once you change inside, then your external reality changes. Jupiter is that change that occurs in such a way that you consider it to be lucky, fortuitous. Okay? Now, another expression of Jupiter is the nature of abundance. The abundance is representative of the field that is searched for, because that space that the psyche eventually explores, right, is a space that is expanding. The reason for that expansion is that centaur, the lower form of that centaur. That's why it's a horse or something like that, because it needs to cover a lot of ground. That's a lot of sexuality. So for those Sagittarians out there who don't understand, if you really find a connection that you want, you really need that genuine, honest connection, and you need it very frequently. You are the only one who can assess what it does to you. But if you are genuine about what it does to you and the connection itself, what you bring down from there is supposed to take you into Capricorn. And Capricorn is the establishment of material success. It doesn't deal with frivolities. How do you think you get to know exactly what it is that needs to happen in Capricorn? It's because of the Sagittarian experience. And all of that is taking place in the mind. So the abundance that is Jupiter basically is the abundance of this expanding space, and it translates into the abundance of knowing and understanding that is brought down. Most of the time when people are miserable is because they can't find expression for their true nature. And so the result is frustration. And they're angry. Now, what this connection does, if you're lucky enough to find the right connection for you, what it does is to drain that frustration, because the frustration itself is a blockage. Okay? So where you have your Jupiter is how this frustration is being drained. Now remember, the blockage itself is Saturnian. And it is there to provide the need for motivation, the assertiveness for motivation. Because that's what, when you're frustrated, it's like you're banging your head against a wall and you want to break through, but you can't. Alright? So too much of it and you're in trouble. The role of Jupiter in the natal chart, you can see, is just to drain the frustration, just enough for you to be able to grow. Now, so the Jupiterian experience is felt as a type of awareness that you are growing in wisdom. That even though you have difficulties, they are really there to help you grow in wisdom. That's really what it is. So Jupiter in Scorpio, when you begin to experience its effects very well, then the mind becomes very practical in a sense. You become shrewd. Shrewder than normal, so to speak, alright? Because now you are able to focus on what matters. So that you can assess, a tremendous amount of information and pick out precisely what is relevant to be able to build tangible material success. Because that is the whole point. Tangibility. Otherwise you can't get to Capricorn. So Jupiter in Scorpio has a very deep meaning regarding the nature of sex and what it's supposed to mean to you and the connection that it is supposed to inspire. Because there is something about that connection. If you're sleeping with the wrong person, then that connection, it just remains dull and stymied. It doesn't mean anything. It's about finding that connection to the right person. Now, here's the interesting part. The person will never be the precise definition of your other half because they are still an individual person. But they can come close enough to allow you to ascend into the heights of mental or psychic upliftment that you need to be able to bring down the awareness that you deserve or that you need. Now, if you can't do this, if you're stuck in problems and you can't see a way forward, then that connection is not right for you. It's one of the clearest indications or indicators that the connection simply isn't right for you, especially when you have significant placements in Scorpio. This is something that is very, it's a secret, really. Most people don't know this. Now, another aspect of Jupiter in Scorpio is the aspect that has to do with other people's resources. Now, the reason why Scorpio is said to be representative of other people's resources is because it's a projection of Taurus. And Taurus is concerned with material value in terms of the way that the senses are able to deliver the perception of material value. Scorpio, on the other hand, is the projection of this material value with another. And usually that involves or that implies sex, because sex is the material expression of your senses with another person. Okay? But it also means that anytime you share any feeling tied to your material senses with another person, that is also described as a degree of intimacy. So if you go for dates together and you enjoy the same food and you share the same food, if you share any of these connections or stimuli that are delivered by your material senses, you are in the realm of Scorpio, and that transports you into the realm of intimacy. But it's a lot deeper than that, obviously, because intimacy is something that involves the vulnerability of truth. So it's very complex. It means so many things to different people, but in this area now, we want to assume that Scorpio has this connotation with shared resources. Okay? Now, Jupiter in Scorpio means that you are able to access other people's resources for your personal use. And the only reason why that would be the case is because you are going to be squeezed materially. And so the compensator is placed in a situation where at critical times or critical moments when there is genuine need to aid your developmental process as encapsulated in your natal chart, then other people's resources play a critical role so that your life doesn't crash and you don't crash and burn. But obviously, like with everything regarding Jupiter, it's how it's achieved, because sometimes people run out of luck. It's not luck they run out of. There is no dice throwing somewhere or die throwing somewhere that is determining this. It's from your behavior. It's from how you are and who you are. And like I've said, the origin of this is that contact, that initial contact that I have been describing. Once that contact is lost, or once it's removed, or once you cannot achieve it, or once you cannot have it, then the connection to luck becomes much more difficult. That's really what it is. Okay? Who would have thought that luck is something that has its origins in this deep need for contact? Okay? But Jupiter in Scorpio also involves exploration within the field of Scorpio. So usually it connotes a tendency towards many sexual partners. Because remember, it's an exploration of a search space. Okay? And Scorpio must deliver the Jupiterian experience. And the way that it does that, it tries to create as many contacts as possible in the hope that you will find one that is the actual connection itself. Okay? So that's what happens, But intimacy, the quality of intimacy is that intimacy is also a projection of value. That's why it sits opposite Taurus on a natal chart. Because when intimacy becomes valueless, the individual themselves has lost all value. And that process needs to be rebuilt. And it's very difficult to rebuild the self-value of an individual once it has become eroded. So that Jupiter in Scorpio is a fine balance. Okay? And this is part of the difficulty inherent within Scorpio itself. It's a fine balance. It requires a level of wisdom. But the idea is that as a compensator, depending on how Jupiter is placed within the natal chart, then things won't be that bad.